My wife loves to garden, and for years she has dreamed of having her very own potting bench. So in this video, I make her dreams come true by building her very own potting bench using basic construction techniques. And for the first time ever, I pour a solid concrete countertop. Oh no, I broke it. Yeah, you'll want to keep watching so you don't make that mistake. But overall, this bench turned out great. It's loaded with features, including these cedar slats that are not only decorative, but hold these baskets for storing things like gloves and tools and other things that you need for gardening. A little shelf up top here to hold extra flowers and plants and supplies. And a really neat cutout in the concrete top with this slot that you can brush and sweep all of your dirt and debris into a trash can down below. And it's also got this cover that can be put in place when it's not in use. Now this project is going to take about 2 days to complete, so we should get to work.
Start by cutting all the pieces you need for the frame and legs to length. I'm using pressure treated 2x4s over cedar because the cost of cedar is over 3 times more expensive in my area, plus I plan on staining this bench. Later, we will add some cedar slats to the back of the bench, but we'll wait to cut those pieces to length later in the video.
If you don't have a miter saw, you can also cut these to length using a circular saw and a framing square.
Once everything is cut to length, we can start assembly by making 2 frames. One frame will support the concrete countertop and the other one will become the lower shelf. These are assembled using basic construction techniques, also known as butt joints and 3-inch screws. Oh, and one other note here. The bottom shelf gets an additional support brace on each side. This will give us a sturdy place to attach our casters later. The outside dimensions for both of these frames should be exactly the same.
Now that that's done, we can make some legs.
The legs are assembled using more butt joints, a little Titebond 3 and some 3-inch screws. Titebond 3 is waterproof and a good option for outdoor projects. The 2 pieces that make up the front legs are exactly the same height, but the 2 back legs have these longer pieces that extend out. These extensions will help support a small shelf at the top of the bench and provide the sides of the frame that we can attach our cedar slats to later. Make sure you assemble the back legs so that they are a mirror image of each other. Otherwise, one of the extended parts on the back legs will not end up on the back, it'll end up on the side.
Now we can screw the leg pieces to the frame pieces and make something that actually looks like a potting bench.
Start by attaching 2 front legs to the bottom frame piece using some 3-inch screws and some wood glue. And just to provide some extra strength, I also added these 2 7/8 inch lag screws in each leg, then attach the back legs the exact same way. Just make sure that the extended pieces of each leg are on the back of the bench. When the top frame is attached to its legs, it needs to be flush with the top 2 front legs and the shorter pieces of the back legs. It's also a good idea to take a moment and make sure everything is level and square before going full send on all these screws. Now you can add a 2x4 brace piece between the back of the back leg extensions. Then add a 2x6 piece between the back leg extensions where the countertop will go. Both of these are just attached from behind with some screws. These pieces make the rest of the frame we need to attach our cedar slats later. Now pre-drill and screw a 1x6 pressure treated board to the top 2x4 to make a small shelf. I also screwed on some small triangle shelf support pieces. These were cut from the 1x6 scrap that was left over from the shelf. It's time to add some casters so we can move this thing around a little easier. With the bench on its back, we can install these heavy-duty 5-inch casters using the supplied hardware. Just mark the spot of each screw, pre-drill a hole, and screw them on. These casters are nice because they lock, so your bench won't go rolling around while it's in use. There's a link for these casters and the other supplies needed for this project in the description down below.
Now we can focus on making the concrete top for this bench. And if this is something that you'd like to see more of in the future, let me know in the comments down below. And if you're not already subscribed, I would appreciate if you took the opportunity to do that now. It really helps out the channel, lets YouTube know that you like the content that you're seeing, and it ensures that I can continue to create content like this for you in the future.
Now, before I can go around pouring concrete, I need to make a mold out of some melamine. I went back and forth on whether I should do a pour in place type top directly on the bench or do a formed pour into a mold. I decided to do a formed pour because I don't have much concrete experience, and I think this technique gives me a better chance of getting a smooth finish in the end. Plus, I already had some scraps of melamine from past epoxy pours that I can use for this project. And everything screwed together, we can take some of this silicone caulk and seal all the edges. Then I spray some foaming window cleaner on the silicone and smooth it out with my trusty finger.
Real quick, I need to give credit where credit is due. I got this concrete pouring technique from Michael Builds, a fellow YouTuber. His channel is awesome, and I recommend that if you want any more information on how to pour concrete or make different concrete projects, that you go check out his channel. I'll leave a link down below to make that easy for you to do, after you watch this video, of course. And one more thing. If you do go over to his channel, leave a comment on one of his videos letting him know that Ben Van Kirk sent you his way. He has no idea who I am, and this is going to confuse the heck out of him. Alright, let's get back to building this mold already.
Now we need to add one more thing to the mold before we pour. We need to create a slot in the countertop so we can sweep dirt and debris into a container below. This slot also needs to support a wooden cover when it's not in use. This mold piece should create a void in the finished top. This was made from some pieces of foam insulation board stuff and held together with some silicone. In theory, this lip should support the cover piece later. This contraption is attached to the bottom of the mold using more silicone. This concrete pour is actually upside down, so take that into account if you try something like this on your own. The last thing to do is spray the entire mold down with WD-40 and wipe off the excess with a shop towel. This will prevent the concrete from sticking to the mold.
Now, just like my epoxy pours, I'm going to give this mold 24 hours to cure before I pour anything into it. That just gives time for the silicone to set up and everything to dry so I don't get a bunch of leaks. I will say, this concrete pour is probably different than what you've seen in the past because we're not going to use a standard quick concrete fast mix stuff. So let's go ahead and do this pour already.
We're going to use this rapid set mortar mix. This mortar can only be found at a certain orange colored big box store with a name that is very similar to Dome Hippo. Start by adding 5 liters of cold clean water to a 5-gallon bucket, then add 1 bag of mortar. Then thoroughly mix it using a mixer attachment thingy on a drill. Now this peanut butter consistency is too thick for us to work with, and this is where a packet of flow control comes to the rescue. Just watch what happens when we mix 1 packet of flow control into the mortar mix. The mortar becomes more like pancake batter. This will allow us to get a very smooth finish, free of air bubbles, on our finished top. This 1.5-inch top is about 54 inches long and 20 inches wide and took 2 full bags. I made a critical mistake during this pour. If you know what it is, let me know in the comments down below. If you don't know what the mistake is, keep watching so you don't make it too. Once both batches are poured into the mold, screed the top with a straight piece of scrap wood. Once it's flat, you can use a rubber hammer or something else to tap the sides and bottom of the mold. This will work out most of the bubbles. Now the top you're seeing here will actually become the bottom of the finished countertop, so it doesn't need to be perfect. This is the nice thing about pouring a top this way. Plus, you can leave a secret message for your significant other to find later.
Now this rapid set mortar mix is going to cure to about 2500 psi in just 1 hour. And it'll cure to about 6500 psi in 28 days. Basically to say this stuff is super strong and it cures super fast. Now I let my piece cure for about 1.5 hours before I decided to take it out of the mold, and I just misted it down with a little water about every 15 minutes when it started looking dry, and this will help prevent cracks in the curing process. Now while this is curing, we need to do a couple of more things to the potting bench so that we're prepared to add the top when we get there. First, I need to get a coat of stain on this thing. I'll add some Trex decking to the bottom frame to give us a shelf to put supplies on, and we need to come up with a way to build our cedar slats so that they can hold the baskets for extra supplies.
I'm applying this Cabot semi-solid exterior wood stain in the Foothills color with a cheap paintbrush. The semi-solid stain will give the bench a rustic look and allows you to see a little bit of the wood grain once it's applied. Then I attach some Trex decking with some camo screws to the bottom frame to create the bottom shelf. You could also use some 1x6 deck boards instead of Trex. I used Trex because I had some scraps lying around from a deck build. Let's cut some cedar slats to length for the back of the bench. By clamping the outer cedar frame pieces to the workbench, we ensure a perfect fit, then secure the corners of this frame with some glue and screws. Now that the frame is done, we can add some more cedar slats to fill in the remaining space. Use some scrap pieces of wood as a spacer, and each slat will be perfectly spaced. Each slat gets attached with some more glue and screws. Just attach the cedar slat thingy to the potting bench frame from behind by pre-drilling some holes and adding some screws. Finish it off with one more vertical piece that is screwed to the center of each slat from behind. This will add more support. Now back to touching up that stain.
Just kidding, enough of that. Nobody likes to watch paint dry. Instead, let's watch the complete disappointment on my face when I take this thing out of the mold and it cracks and breaks in half.
After curing for 1.5 hours, I flipped the mold over and crossed my fingers hoping that it will come out in one piece. And it didn't. Bummer. What I should have done is add some sort of reinforcement around these narrow areas where the slot is when I poured this thing. I think that would have prevented this break. Luckily, the break was pretty clean and I was able to use this rapid set sealant and adhesive to glue it back together when I installed it to the frame. I also used a lot of this same adhesive glue stuff to hold the whole top to the frame. The silver lining is that this piece was heavy and moving two pieces was easier than moving one.
Now this bench is looking great, but we need to add just one more detail to the top to finish it off.
Just cut a scrap of cedar to the size of the slot in the top, then drill a finger hole so it's easy to remove. Round over the edges and do some light sanding. This small feature turned out to be great, and it really adds a cool custom look that makes this piece really stand out.
Let me know in the comments down below what you did differently for your potting bench if you built one, and if you haven't built one yet, remember, you can build it yourself. But before you go making one of these for yourself, watch the video on the screen right over here. YouTube is convinced that you're going to love this video as much as you love this one. And as always, thanks for watching.